Good morning, everybody. This is another edition of the Passball Show, brought to you by JohnPLA.com, as well as St. Aloysius Church and School in Jackson, New Jersey. One more day till start of Major League Baseball season in 2019, and obviously all the excitement and anticipation is there in regards to fans of all different types of teams. And during the show today, I'm going to spend a little time talking about each one of the 30 teams, because right now, and obviously the season has technically started with the 2 games in Japan last week, which of course we talked about and obviously happened. The Seattle Mariners have won 2 and lost 0. They got the best record in baseball. The Oakland Athletics, a team that won 97 games last year, is 0-2 and has the worst record in Major League Baseball right now. And the other 28 teams have not played yet. And if you're a fan of any one of those 28 teams, even the Mariners or even the Athletics, whether expectations are certainly not up there with the 2-0 and a 1,000 winning percentage that the Seattle Mariners have. And obviously the Oakland Athletics and their fans and their team expect more than the 0 winning percentage and the 0-2 record that they have. But if you're a fan of every team right now, any single team in Major League Baseball, or maybe you're a fan of multiple teams, a team has a chance to do something special. And we can talk about the expectations of what some teams are supposed to be as opposed to others. If you're a fan of the Baltimore Orioles, if you're a fan of the Miami Marlins, if you're a fan of the Kansas City Royals, well, yeah, I think if you're realistic, you understand that the expectation may not necessarily be a World Series championship this year. That being said, anything can happen. And this is the part of the season as we get into opening day. And like I said, it doesn't matter what teams are favorited. It doesn't matter what team is expected to win the World Series, what team is expected to finish in the bottom part of a given division. That same chance exists for that good team. That same chance exists for that really bad team. And all it takes is a couple wins either way. And I'll use the Marlins as an example, just a random team. They win a couple games in April. They start out and they are 16-10 in the first month of the season, hypothetically. A lot of people, a lot of experts, a lot of people that consider themselves knowledgeable about baseball will not believe into that, will not expect that to be an example of what to expect over the next series of months. But they exceeded expectations for 1 month. So the question's going to be, what teams are going to exceed expectations in the beginning part of the season? Because that always comes at the expense of somebody else, another team that was expected to do very well. And obviously I'm not going to jump to any conclusions when we look at Seattle, when we look at Oakland. Seattle won 2 games in Japan. And you know what? There's a very good, strong Mariners contingent that exists in the country of Japan. A lot of it has to do with Ichiro and the fact that Ichiro was being honored. So the Mariners win 2 games and the Athletics lose 2 games. I'm not going to jump too much into the conclusions over it. But that being said, there's going to be some surprise teams. There's going to be some teams that maybe I didn't give any credit to, or a lot of experts didn't give any credit to. And as that goes on over the course of the season, it's going to come, like I said, at the expense of a team that has high expectations. And I think of the Washington Nationals last year. A lot was expected out of them. The Atlanta Braves got off to a good start. They got off to a good start at the expense of the Washington Nationals. So as we go through the season, it's going to be very interesting to see how everything turns out. But good starts by bad teams, like I said, are going to come at the expense of good teams that were expected to do well. So let me get this started. We're going to talk, I'll pull it up on JohnPLA.com if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out, and you can follow with me. I got my 30-1 MLB countdown previews, and what it really does for me, I set it up with the over-unders each year, and I've been doing this since 2011, and I come up with win totals. They're fictitious, they're my opinion. Some I reach a little bit, some I kind of do within the confines of what is expected. In the end, there's going to be 10 teams that are going to make the playoffs, the top 10, and then 11 through 30 will not. So we'll start out by talking about the Baltimore Orioles. And what a lot of people don't know about the Baltimore Orioles is this is a very proud franchise, and unless you're a Baltimore Orioles fan, you know that this is probably the last thing that this region and this group of fans would expect to have to be going through right now. And all you have to really do is go within anywhere of 2 of the last 5 years and jump in a DeLorean, go in a calendar and go back 365 days. Nobody were expecting the Orioles of 2018 to be as bad as they were. Nobody looked at the Baltimore Orioles and were like, dude, they're just going to be a joke of baseball. They're going to be an embarrassment. They're going to start their 5-year rebuild this year. It's something that some extenuating circumstances went out there. They had some expectations in regards to their starting pitching. It didn't come through. Big free agent contracts to Mark Trumbo and Chris Davis didn't work out. And it seemed like everybody that they tried to sign, whether it was an Andrew Kashner, an Alex Cobb, everybody that they were adding to the mix was not necessarily helping them. And of course you had the ongoing saga in regards to Manny Machado, expecting to be traded. The Orioles knowing that it was probably unlikely that he was going to be retained for next season. So the trade ends up being worked out, but also you have a couple months of ongoing trade discussions. And those trade discussions, and Ron, I really appreciate you tuning into the show. Like I said, anything else that's on your mind, let me know. Thank you for your comment and a compliment. But the Orioles were kind of fed into something that ended up becoming really bad. And this is something that you don't want to say happened overnight, but I do believe it's something that kind of escalated with the intent that the Orioles had in trading Manny Machado. There was no extension that he was going to reach with that team. He was testing free agency, and it really came down to it that the Baltimore Orioles made the decision that, listen, as good of a player as Manny Machado is, a guy entering his age 25 season already with several great years behind him and in front of him, and they weren't going to build their team around him. And they weren't going to be able to, even if they came up with the biggest contract offer and decided to give Manny Machado 10 years and $300 million, it was unlikely that he was going to be coming back to them. The Padres' offer of 10 years of $300 million was probably more valuable than what the Orioles could have offered at the same price. So now you're talking about a situation where you have a team that obviously was very busy at the trade deadline last year, moving players that they could move. Relief pitchers, they're in a spot. I mean, you look at Nick Mullins, who I think could be a very good center fielder. He's got some speed. He's a kind of a player you could build the team around. Trey Mancini. There's a handful of decent players there. Jonathan VR, so I think if you look at it from the Orioles and maybe their way or their decision to play baseball in 2019, it's going to have a little to do with kind of pushing the envelope. Maybe try to take that extra base, steal some bases, play a little strategy, hit against the shift. And I think if the Orioles could do some things like that, they may be able to steal a couple wins early in the season. It's going to be hard to see them avoid losing 95 plus though. And I think they'll lose somewhere in 100, somewhere between 100 and 110. But Brandon Hyde, the general manager, Mike Elias, the general manager, they have a philosophy where I think they're going to play a different brand of baseball instead of just relying on the talent in the back of the baseball card. So if you give me the most optimistic point of view when it comes to the Baltimore Orioles, I think they could win a couple more games than expected. I just don't think they're going to go out there and surprise anybody. Maybe they lose 90 games instead of 100 or 105. And I think from an organization that's rebuilding right now, it's probably the most positive thing you could say is try to take a couple strides. Get yourself in a little bit of a better position going into 2020 than you were going into 2019. You have a new manager, you have a new general manager, there's a new organizational philosophy in there. Let it resonate throughout the clubhouse, resonate throughout the organization, and resonate throughout the fan base. And maybe, when we jump in the DeLorean and go 365 days ahead, the expectations for 2020 will be a little better than this season. Now, the Miami Marlins, I look at them and, a lot of people are saying, hey, that may be the worst team in baseball. That may be one of the worst teams in baseball history. And, I disagree with that for a couple reasons. I think they're very young. I think they're some mid-ranged players that actually have some upside. Some guys like a Peter O'Brien, a Trevor Richards, some players that were not necessarily considered top prospects that could become useful major league players. Brian Anderson was never a big-time prospect, but ended up coming through last year and put up some pretty good numbers. Played in a couple different positions, too. I think the Marlins could be a pain-in-the-ass kind of team. And as a Mets fan, you obviously know what that feels like. The Marlins, as bad as they've ever been at certain times, have always been a thorn in the side to the Mets. But, the trade of JT Realmuto looked probably like the final blow or the final decision that this team was not going to go anywhere this year. Jorge Alfaro comes in there as a catcher. Chad Wallach is there to compete with him. Miguel Rojas, the decent player at shortstop. But there's really nobody that stands out there. You're like, wow, you know what? If I'm going up against the Miami Marlins in their lineup, I'm going to pitch around this guy. Those guys obviously were all traded. Their names are Stanton and Yelich and Ozuna and Realmuto and D. Gordon. Now imagine if they even had D. Gordon. I mean, you could talk about a similar team to that of the Baltimore Orioles, where you talk about pushing the envelope and running and trying to take that extra base, hitting against the shift, doing all the things that the modern-day baseball fan of 2019 doesn't want to do. So I look at the Marlins, and I think, optimistically, I think they could be a thorn in the side to a team or two in the National League East. And when you look at a division like that, that has such high expectations for the other four teams in that division, the team that I'd fear the most, if I was one of those four teams, would be the Miami Marlins. Because if the Marlins could somehow have their number, whatever team we're talking about, then that could be the difference between that team getting in the playoffs and not getting in the playoffs. So I look at the Marlins as a spoiler type of team, but a pest in the NL East. Probably not winning any more than 60, 65 games this year. But I think out of those wins, there's going to be some big wins against some division rivals in the NL East. So the next team I want to talk about is the Kansas City Royals. Because this is a team that, unfortunately, in spite of winning themselves a World Series championship, in spite of getting the back-to-back World Series in 2014 and 2015, they made their bad decisions back then when they were winning a World Series championship, when they were winning AL pennants. They had a series of players, and this was not hidden from anybody. This was not only public knowledge, but this was knowledge that the Kansas City Royals had from the beginning when they assembled their players. They made a trade with the Milwaukee Brewers, sending Zach Greinke there. That trade got them Lorenzo Cain and Alcides Escobar. They made a trade later on and they got themselves Wade Davis from the Tampa Bay Rays. And what all these players had in common, in addition to the players that they developed themselves, whether it was Eric Hosmer or Mike Moustakas, is that every single one of these players were hitting free agency at the end of the 2017 season. And what did the Royals do about that, knowing that the core of their team was all going to test free agency the same year? They couldn't have extended one player. They couldn't have made a decision to build their team around one player as opposed to the other. Maybe held on to a Hosmer. Maybe made it a little easier to negotiate a deal with Lorenzo Cain. And I'm not talking about completely new money. I'm not talking about blowing the payroll up to 150, 160 million. But I'm talking about making a little bit of a commitment to a couple of the players that were centripetal forces, and you're winning yourself a World Series championship. And the fact that they didn't do that, the fact that all of these players are gone, and you look at the construction of this roster, which, by the way, Dayton Moore, a guy who's known for very, very good ability in regards to scouting, has not, set up a good farm system there. This Royals team looks bad, and unfortunately, with all due respect to the Kansas City Royals fans, there's nobody to blame but the Kansas City Royals. This is a team that's going to be in transition. This is going to be a team that's going to be looking at the outskirts of free agency when we talk about players that can be had on a 1-year or minor league contract just for depth purposes while they try to get a little bit younger. But unfortunately, in order to get younger, they have to have better players in their own minor league system. And maybe down the road, you'll start to see the fruits of some of their investments over the last couple of years, but you're not going to see it right now. And I'd be shocked if the Royals were not the third team in Major League Baseball this year to lose 100 games. Let me talk about the Detroit Tigers for a second. They got a tough blow when they found out that Michael Fulmer is going to have Tommy John surgery, and he was obviously the pitcher that was acquired in the Yoenis Cespedes trade. And I think that the Tigers for the last couple of years have had some dampered expectations that certainly are not up there with what had been seen over the last series of years. The Brad Ausmus Tigers, the ones led by Miggy and Verlander, and a series of really good dominant players where you talk about veterans in just about every spot and facet of the team. That's not the Tigers that you look at when we get ready for 2019. And you look at a guy like Daz Cameron, who came over in a trade last year or a couple years ago. He'd be a good player to get a good look at. Miguel Cabrera, the question's going to be, and obviously if you played fantasy baseball this year, it was kind of the Russian roulette with Miguel Cabrera. Do you take him at a certain point in a draft? When is far enough that you could say that Miguel Cabrera would be a good investment to make? In regards to that. So, we have another spam call. Once again, Passball Show, JohnPielli.com, the whole thing. It doesn't get any better than that. Yesterday we had spilled coffee. Today we got spam phone calls. And who knows how long it's going to even ring, which is the great part of it. So let me just finish Tigers real quick. Miggy, obviously a very big factor. And maybe that team's surprising a little bit. Very weak division in the AL Central. I just told you about how bad I thought the Kansas City Royals were going to be. The Tigers in that same mix. The White Sox, hey, maybe you could expect a little bit more out of them. But, hey, if the Tigers could do what I said about the Marlins, what I said about the Orioles, win a couple games early in the season against some opponents that the experts don't expect you to beat. Win 2 out of 3 in a big series against Cleveland. Get off to a good start. Have a winning record after the first month of the season. And you know what? If Miguel Cabrera is Miguel Cabrera, I don't care how bad your team is. Tigers are going to be a little bit better. Unfortunately, I'm not investing very much in it. And if we get anything out of Miguel Cabrera this year, I'm having a hard time seeing what else they're getting from anywhere else. Nicholas Castellanos still wants to be traded. He's probably a prime piece to be had at the trading deadline this year. So I look at the Tigers. Can't really expect very much more than a 66-96 season. They're going to be better than the Royals, but I can't see them being better than too many other teams in baseball. Texas Rangers. I look at a player like Nomar Mazara, and I really think that this is a player that has shown that he's taken his game up to a certain level, and I think he could actually become a star in this game. And the Rangers very desperately need a star. Their star, Adrian Beltre, retired. As Drupal Cabrera comes in there, I'm sure he could, help respectfully fill in a role there at third base. He's not going to be Adrian Beltre. You got yourself your Elvis Andrus, handful of decent players there. You're still sitting on a Shin Soo Choo contract. And then you have this philosophy in regards to pitching is to saturate your rotation with a series of number 3 and number 4 pitchers. And hope that one of those number 3 and number 4 pitchers will pitch like, I don't know, maybe a number 2. That's not going to happen. And I know the Texas Rangers have made some investments in their farm system and are looking to get a little better over the next series of years. They brought in a new manager, Chris Woodward, which I think he's a very good baseball guy. Did a very good job with the Tigers. With the Dodgers and working for Dave Roberts. And I think they have a very positive mindset there. One that probably is going to preach some patience. So I look at the Rangers and I see them at 68 and 94, last place in the AL West. Seattle Mariners, who are baseball's only undefeated team right now, The 2-0 Mariners, the undefeated Mariners, the Mariners that faced the Oakland Athletics twice and beat them both times, are still, I think, on a pace to finish 72-90. If I'm thinking about something positive, and obviously I think their 2 wins may have been about the atmosphere, about honoring Ichiro, about having an extra fandom in Japan, rooting for the Seattle Mariners, even though it was technically a home game for the Oakland Athletics. You know, you do look at some of the veteran players that were moved in there. Hunter Strickland, can he establish himself as a major league closer after having some ups and downs with the Giants? It's probably not going to be Edwin Diaz, but if he could solidify that role, that would answer one of the questions. You know, Jay Bruce, Edwin Encarnacion. What do these players have left? And, you know, does EE have a 40 home run season left? Can Jay Bruce come back off an injury-plagued 2018 season and hit another 30 home runs? Kyle Seager's hurt right now. When is he coming back? If he can come back and be anything close to the player he's been over the last half a dozen years, you know, you're looking at an offensive team that can be a little better. But you're also looking at some of the past moves, trading James Paxton, trading some of the other impactful players that they have on his roster, whether it's a Cano or an Edwin Diaz or a Gene Segura. And I don't know if they necessarily got their money's worth, at least on the major league level right now. You could say J.P. Crawford and Jared Kelenic and Justin Dunn somewhere down the road are going to become major parts of the Seattle Mariners' future, and you might be right. It may be a good trade over time. But how does that impact the major league roster now? I see the Mariners taking a major step back, 72-90, and 4th place in the AL West. So we'll move on to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And we're going to start to move a little bit quicker as we get close to the playoff teams. Diamondbacks, losing Patrick Corbin, trading Paul Goldschmidt, still sitting on the astronomical contract of Zach Greinke, who they're paying to be their #1 starter, but may have realized with that, have forked over their opportunity and their chance to be able to extend Paul Goldschmidt. May have kept them from having the opportunity to retain Patrick Corbin. And I think those are 2 major factors on the team last year. You throw in A.J. Pollock, who left to go as a free agent to the Dodgers. And I don't really know what to say positively if we're looking at this Diamondbacks team, especially since they're competing in the National League West that's gotten better. The Rockies are good. The Dodgers are good. The Padres are better. And even the Giants, listen, I can't say that the Diamondbacks are that much better than the Giants. You know, you wonder who's going to step up and be able to provide some big innings. Hopefully Taijuan Walker comes back at some point this season, helps them in their starting rotation. They signed Greg Holland. And Greg Holland, unfortunately, even though he had some good innings at the end of last season with the Washington Nationals, is a mess. And he's a guy that, you know, is either going to be really good or really bad. And I don't know where I'm going to point to in the Arizona Diamondbacks lineup or starting rotation or bullpen that's going to make me excited about this season. And I think the Diamondbacks, unfortunately, aren't going to look so good this year. Maybe down the road they could get a little bit better. But, you know, when you lose Pollock, you lose Corbin, and then you trade Paul Goldschmidt, especially with the trade for Paul Goldschmidt was I don't know. I mean, did they necessarily get market value for him? Luke Weaver's going to be part of the rotation. Okay. They got the young catcher, you know, Carson Kelly. But are you talking about 2 players that are going to be integral parts of this organization going forward? I don't know. Wilmer Flores signed to play first base. Listen, Mets fans are going to always love Wilmer Flores. One thing that resonates with me is that he never really proved himself as an everyday player. Maybe he does it in Arizona. And if I'm thinking optimistically, maybe that's what I lean on. A guy like Eduardo Escobar, a guy like Wilmer Flores, a guy like Jake Lamb. Maybe these guys end up going out there having career years, put them all together. You get a little help from a Luke Weaver. You get a little help from maybe a Taijuan Walker down the road. And Greg Holland looks like Greg Holland in 2014. And maybe the Diamondbacks end up beating the Giants and beating the Padres and getting a couple more wins in the NL West and, I don't know, maybe getting close to 500. I don't expect any of that to happen. I look at the Diamondbacks at 73-89, last place, NL West. So now I look at the White Sox, and the White Sox are going to transition me into the next topic I want to talk about today. Eloy Jimenez, their top prospect, their starting center fielder opening day, ends up being recalled or called up, or his contract was purchased, and he's going to be in center field replacing the injured John Jay. Now, he wasn't going to come up because the White Sox were going to manipulate his service time to keep him down in the minor leagues for 2 weeks so they could get that 6th year of team control over the player. And I think it's something that Major League Baseball, if they're smart, they'll make sure that they address this in the next collective bargaining agreement. If they're smart, they'll make sure that this is something that is not even an issue after 2021. I mean, what does it really matter? What does the team gain outside of that extra year of team control? Now, the only thing that I can think of that would make sense is do what the Chicago White Sox did and sign the player to a contract extension. Do what the Philadelphia Phillies did last year with Scott Kingery. Don't worry about, holding them back from the opening day roster. Just sign them to a contract extension and cover that 6th year. And I'm surprised more teams aren't being active, especially when we're talking about extensions right now. Fernando Tatis is about to make the San Diego Padres. Pete Alonso may very well make the New York Mets. These should be players that should be with their agents talking to teams about the extensions that they're going to sign to cover them through that 6th year. If the team is kind enough to bring you forward and not manipulate your service time, then I think you should be grateful enough to sign that contract extension and get you through year number 6. So the White Sox have some good young pitching. I look at, Dylan Cease, who I think is once he gets to the major leagues, is going to be a pretty good pitcher. I think of Carson Fulmer. I think of Carlos Rodon. And they have a series of good young arms there. Of course, Ronaldo Lopez. Yeah, they really do have some talented, good young pitchers. They signed Ivan Nova. They brought themselves in Yonder Alonso, signed John Jay, brought some veterans in there. I think the expectation was that they're going to be able to go out there and sign themselves Manny Machado. It didn't work out, but I think the White Sox could still benefit from this season. Maybe improve a couple of games. And maybe do what I said about some other teams earlier, surprise, and end up putting themselves in a position where they can potentially take some games away from a team like Cleveland or a team like Minnesota. But right now I got the White Sox 75 and 87. Similarly to the Pittsburgh Pirates, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about. They made a very big move last year when they made the trade for Chris Archer. They brought in Corey Dickerson at the beginning of the season last year. And this is a team that, once again, excuse me, is in a spot where they need to, defecate or get off the pot. They have some good players that are kind of built pretty well together and can kind of use that little jump start, that little extra, I don't know, maybe middle of the order bat, or that extra veteran player that's going to put them over the top. And in a division that seemed like every other team did that, from the Reds to the Cardinals to the Brewers to the Cubs, who probably didn't have to because they were well equipped already. The Pirates did not do that. And I think the Pirates are going to suffer this year. And a team that maybe on paper may be better than 75 and 87, unfortunately, is going to be beat up in its own division. I think the Reds are going to come from them. I think the Cardinals and the Brewers and the Cubs are going to come from them. There's really not a bad team in that division, and I think because of that, the fact that the Pittsburgh Pirates never stood up and took that extra stride to back the team that they have this year, which I think is a good team, could have used that extra piece to put themselves over the top. They decided not to do it. It's going to cost them 75 and 87, last place NL Central. San Francisco Giants, I got them a couple games better than the Arizona Diamondbacks. Leaning on Madison Bumgarner a little bit. I think this is a guy, especially when he's getting close to free agency, can go out there and throw that 200-plus innings, can get the 200-plus strikeouts, can have that season where he's an all-star, where he leads the staff, where he wins the team a couple extra games on the strength of his own arm. He can hit a little bit, but I could care less about pitchers hitting because they all can't hit. You ask, what is improved about this Giants team? And I don't think very much is. It's a series of journeyman players that they brought in on minor league or low base guaranteed contracts. I'm just looking at kind of a little bit of a whim. Maybe they play a little harder for Bruce Bochy, knowing that it's his last season. And I see them winning 78 games, which is not 88 games. It still may be a little more than a lot of people expect. So my Giants 78 and 84 prediction is probably one of the bigger surprises out of all of them. Staying in the NL West, San Diego Padres, Fernando Tatis Jr. starting shortstop opening day. I like the Kinsler signing. I think Machado certainly helps them. They have a little bit of a more formidable offense now. And you have an outfield with guys like Will Myers and Franmil Reyes and Hunter Renfroe and Margot. A series of very good outfielders that can help this team in a lot of different ways. And if they hit on two of them, that offense is going to be a lot better. Joey Lucchesi is probably their best starting pitcher. I think they should have been a little more aggressive in regards to pursuing a starter. Not that they didn't try. You heard the names of Corey Kluber and Trevor Bauer and Noah Syndergaard all tied with the San Diego Padres in trade negotiations and rumors. Nothing ever happened. And maybe it was just a matter of the teams not being able to strike a deal that was palatable for both sides. I think the Padres can push 500. I'm not jumping on the Padres bandwagon and considering themselves a playoff team just yet. I can see them winning 80 games. I can see them take some tremendous strides. Tatis and Urias as their middle infield, their corner infield with Hosmer and Machado. That looks like it's going to stay in place for a while. I think at some point they're going to decide on a catcher, whether they like Francisco Mejia or they want to give Austin Hedges a try. The other catcher is going to be out. They're going to make a decision. We'll probably know by the end of the season what three players are going to be in the San Diego Padres outfield going forward. I think from an offensive standpoint, they're starting to identify themselves. Kirby Yates, big year last year as a relief pitcher. I don't see a lot of depth in regards to their starting pitching right now. That's why a guy like Chris Paddock, a guy like Cal Quantrill could be seeing significant time at the Major League roster right now, which may not be a good thing, but also may not be a bad thing. We'll see how it works out. Padres, 80 and 82. Another 80 and 82 team will go Cincinnati Reds. I think they had an off season that probably put them at around the expectation where I have them right now. Matt Kemp, Yasiel Puig certainly helped them offensively. The pitchers that they brought in from Sonny Gray to Tanner Roark to Alex Wood, I think they now have some depth in their rotation. Pitchers that can pitch, 200-something innings, 30 starts to make. I think they're going to improve a little bit. Good thing for Joey Votto. Scooter Gennett being out for a little while is going to hurt them. Eugenio Suarez is their third baseman. They got some talent there. Unfortunately, they're in a division that's going to be good. The Cardinals are going to be good. The Brewers are going to be good. The Cubs are going to be good. That's going to hurt the Reds and their expectation and the possibility of going out there and jumping to that 84 to 88 win plateau. They can get there. They just need to get off to a really good start. But I got them at 80 and 82. 81 and 81, I'm going Tampa Bay Rays. And all I can say is come at me, bro. There's a bunch of people that are very much on this Tampa Bay Rays bandwagon and are on this bandwagon year in and year out. Look at this team and can't imagine that the Rays would ever take a step back. Would never imagine that the Rays would go out of their way and perform at a level that they do every single year. It's almost like it's expected. The talent on this team looks weaker and weaker every year. And you have to admit that. If you're being objective, when you're talking about the Tampa Bay Rays, the talent that's on the field is a little less every year. And I look at this team and I'm wondering, at some point, are they going to kind of fall back to earth? Now, I understand the manager gets the most out of the players. The player development staff that exists there certainly gets the most out of the players. Players come to Tampa and they flourish. Logan Morrison a couple of years ago hits 30, almost 40 home runs. After that, he can't hit a lick anywhere. You go to Tampa Bay, there's something that's in that Kool-Aid that brings out the most in players. I'm not going to be overtaken by what I've seen in the past. This is a Rays team that has not improved. The American League East may not have necessarily improved. Sure, the Yankees did. Red Sox kind of stayed the same. Maybe they're a little worse. The Orioles took a step back. Blue Jays. Talk about them in a minute. But I don't look at anybody that has really stepped up and said, hey, this team as it's constructed is much better than Tampa Bay Rays. So when I say 81 and 81, there's certainly the possibility that they could win 90 again like they did last year. I don't see them winning less than 81 games because I really don't see too many other teams in the American League that have jumped into that realm where they've improved themselves enough. So let me talk about the Blue Jays, 82 and 80. I got them a couple games over 500. A little bit of a surprise. You know, I think of Vlad Jr. playing third base, putting up, you know, Trout-like numbers when he comes up. I think this could be one of the best young players in baseball that we've seen in a long time. And if you go back to the Atlanta Braves of last year with Ronald Acuna, if you look at some of the other really good young players in baseball that have come out and emerged and looked like top players in their first year, they've had positive impacts on their team. And I think that's going to be something that the Blue Jays are going to be able to benefit from. Now, they play the Orioles, and if the Rays are not going to be as good as most people think, then I think there's going to be some wins in the AL East. And once again, kind of a standing point that has existed, very few teams in the Major League Baseball offseason kind of went all in this year. You know, most teams are just like, we'll be okay with what we got. And that's why you're going to see a team like the Toronto Blue Jays go 82 and 80. Another team that's going 82 and 80, and you knew it was coming. If you know about the way that I think, and you followed my picks over the last 7 years, the Oakland Athletics, 97 wins last year. I don't think they did it all in mirrors, but from a starting pitching standpoint, they did. Where are they getting their wins this year? You know, is Brett Anderson, Trevor Cahill, and Edwin Jackson going to go out there and win, 40 games like they did last year for them? They have a very good bullpen. I like Matt Chapman. I think Jurickson Profar was a very good acquisition for them. Matt Olson is hurt. He's a guy that I think they're going to lean very heavily on. I think this is a team that should be able to do better than 82 and 80. But I look at the teams in the AL West, and I see Seattle taking a step back. And like you said, there's just opportunity. Opportunity exists out there that if the A's want to go out there and can prove themselves to win 90-plus games, it wouldn't shock me. But I got them 82 and 80. Washington Nationals, 84 and 78. The loss of Harper. I don't think it's enough to hold them out of the playoffs. And you got to understand this. And hopefully the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams all have the same record at 84 and 78. Nationals, Braves, Cubs, Angels, and Dodgers. All missing the playoffs. But from a National League standpoint, Dodgers, Cubs, Braves, Nationals, all 5 of those teams missing the playoffs by just 1 game. So that means anything can happen. So me saying that the Washington Nationals are 84 and 78, or the Braves, or the Cubs, or the Dodgers, or the Angels, it just means that they're right on the peripheries of making the playoffs. Could very well can make the playoffs. And we'll talk real quick about my 10 through 1. Mets 85 and 77, Indians 89 and 74, Twins 90 and 73, Brewers 90 and 72, Cardinals 91 and 71, Phillies 92 and 70, Red Sox 95 and 76, Rockies 96 and 66, Astros 97 and 65, Yankees 99 and 63. League Championship Series, give me the Yankees against the Astros, and I think the Yankees win that one in 7 games. National League side, give me the Rockies and the Phillies. And I got the Rockies beating the Yankees in the World Series. A shocker. Colorado Rockies 2019 World Series champions. So we talked a little bit about service time manipulation, which I think is a joke. You want to get rid of that in baseball. You simply get the player, the agent, and the general manager together, hammer out an extension, make it redundant. If you're baseball and you had this thing go on in the next collective bargaining agreement, you deserve all the grief that exists. I did want to spend a second to talk about the new rules change in the NFL, and I think there's more possible rules changes coming, especially in regards to the onside kick. It could be eliminated, maybe replaced with a 4th and 15 or a 4th and 20, but the new rules change, which is going to make pass interference reviewable. Or no non-pass interference, reviewable. It's a change that, whether it's good over time, we'll see. It was something that had to happen. Football could not afford or cannot afford another mistake like they had last year with a non-call on a pass interference determining a team getting to the Super Bowl and a team not getting to the Super Bowl. So we'll see how that ends up working out. Once again, this time tomorrow, I'll be down in Washington, D.C., my 17th consecutive opening day, whether the Mets have been home or away. Looking forward to it. Whatever your favorite baseball team is, best of luck to you and your team. A great time in baseball. Right before the season starts, everybody's got a chance. It's exciting. 162 games, the long marathon of the Major League Baseball season about to come. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of twists and a lot of turns and probably a lot of surprises. A lot of what I expected won't happen. A lot of what you expected will not happen. So I hope everybody enjoys the upcoming Major League Baseball season. You know I will. We'll be back with you next week. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.